healthcare system and how it continues to fail women, but most importantly, Black women. Hi guys, welcome back to my space. I'm so excited to have you here. I just want to say thank you to those that continue to comment, share their insights from the videos. I want to welcome the new followers of this very small but growing family that we have managed to create for ourselves. Really excited to be able to get to know you all and to be able to share a little bit of my life. My name is Tendai. I am a millennial trying to navigate YouTube. Today, I want to focus on something that really has been gnawing at me recently. I had this experience about 2 years ago now. With the recent news that I heard, it just brought all these experiences that I had in the past 2 years back to the forefront. And so that's kind of what I'm going to talk about today. And it pertains mostly to the healthcare system and how it continues to fail its patients, especially when it comes to Black women. In the National Library of Medicine, I read that Black women are 41% likely to develop cervical cancer than white women, and are 75% more likely to die from it. Now, you might ask yourself, Tendai, what does cancer, especially cervical cancer, have to do with you? It has everything to do with me because one, I'm a woman, and two, I can too be prone to getting that diagnosis. However, I want to take a step back and really look at something that was recently shared in the media. Is heartbreaking, but also unfortunately not as surprising. In the beginning of March, a very prominent and well-known YouTuber, in fact, she was one of the first YouTube influencers that we were graced with on the internet, and her name is Jessica Pettway. She was 36. Unfortunately, she passed away on March 11th, 2024 from cervical cancer. The story is unique in that she first experienced symptoms that were aligned with someone who would have or might have had fibroid. And so she was able to go to the hospital and tell them what she was experiencing. However, they brushed it off and they told her that it is just fibroids and it's common and it's normal and she can just go home. Now, it's not normal experiencing that kind of bleeding, especially if it's incessant, and it is not something that you can just brush off and tell someone to go home. Unfortunately, in Jessica's experience, it cost her life because they later found out that she actually had cervical cancer from a tumor that was growing next to her cervix. It was too late, it was stage 3, and she passed away a few months after. And this is obviously painful to hear because, as most OBGYNs would say, it could have been preventable. They could have been able to diagnose her early, able to cure and treat the condition. Unfortunately, have lost someone, and she has left her husband and her 2 kids, which I send my love and condolences to them, and I hope that they can continue to find healing and peace. I just want to express how us as Black women, this is not new in terms of being sent away when you are experiencing some form of ailment, pain. We know our bodies and we understand our bodies. We feel discomfort, feel that we are not well physically, we go to the doctor. And here comes my own annoyance with the healthcare system, especially in the US. I want to focus on an experience that I had while I was studying in the US and was experiencing some severe physical challenges that led to the now diagnosis that I have, how that was able to be treated, and how it most times Black women do not get to be listened to, are not afforded the opportunities to receive the proper care, or more times than not are misdiagnosed, and sometimes that can eventually lead to death. And that's where the problem lies. I'm going to focus on fibroids in general, because I believe that every woman who experiences extreme bleeding and abdominal pain definitely needs to go and be checked out by an OBGYN board certified if in case they have fibroids. We're going to start from the top. What are fibroids? Fibroids are non-cancerous growths in the uterus that can develop during a woman's childbearing years. Some women, they can detect fibroids quite early, probably in their 20s, late 20s, or in their 30s. That is where most women are faced with this diagnosis, mostly in their 30s. And as you all know, I'm obviously in my 30s. I started experiencing extreme and excessive bleeding was when I was a teenager. It was considered normal to have a heavy bleeding cycle. No one really took it seriously. You would just be given ibuprofen or a heating pad and you were sent on your way. As I grew older and I experienced extreme bleeding, consistent abdominal pain, hence I could not even do anything during my menstrual cycle. I would always need to lie down to sleep. I would feel cold. It was crazy. As you know, when you're having that much blood loss, that can lead to you being diagnosed with anemia. Anemia is when you are not producing enough red blood cells, and as much as you're producing, you're losing because you're losing so much blood, and that causes your body to just feel weak. Some of the symptoms of anemia include tiredness, weakness, shortness of breath. Sometimes you will have irregular heartbeat, dizziness, lightheadedness, chest pain, cold hands and feet. Skin can become pale, yellowish. Now, that kind of symptom is very rare, but for most people, they do experience the tiredness, experience feeling weak, lightheadedness, and dizziness. Those are the most common symptoms. In my case, I was feeling lightheadedness and dizziness. I couldn't go hiking with friends. In fact, I struggled to be on any kind of incline. And I remember when I was in college, I would feel weak all the time. Thought it was probably the stress of college, which that might have contributed to it, but it was clearly me suffering from an underlying condition. I knew at that time that I was indeed anemic because I'd been diagnosed when I was back home before I had moved to America. So back then, all I had to do was drink iron tablets. However, my condition got increasingly worse and I was referred to a hematologist just so they could see where my iron levels were and what was really causing this incessant blood loss. Unbeknownst to me, it did not click that it would be my periods that were causing the chronic anemia, because each time I was on my period, I was losing a significant amount of blood, and that left me depleted, weak, lightheaded, and I couldn't produce more hemoglobin or iron platelets to be able to be ready for the next cycle. So you're in constant deficit when you're experiencing anemia, which is caused by fibroids, if you do have the fibroids. Other people have other reasons for excessive bleeding or abdominal pains, but in my case, it was definitely the fibroids. Only then, I did not know that that was the case, if that makes sense. Now, don't get me wrong. I know the topic that I am discussing is very difficult and sensitive, because when it comes to these types of conversations, it is more acceptable when it is something that you yourself have gone through. You can be able to relate to what I'm saying. But if you have not gone through this could feel like it's just too much information that really doesn't apply to you. However, I want to share my story, my experience, because I was able to know that I did have fibroids because I was on YouTube and I started looking up if there were other Black women who were experiencing the same symptoms I had at the time. Because at that point, I didn't have anyone I could talk to about the underlying reason of why I was losing so much blood. You can see back home, it was considered normal to have heavy periods. Everyone around me and heavy periods. It's something that us women always talk to each other about. However, there's never this impertinent reason to be able to have that checked out. I remember being referred to a hemoglobin specialist, and they took my blood test, and lo and behold, my iron levels were extremely low, extremely low. I remember the nurse who was giving me my results and explaining them to me, she was like, how are you even handling just day-to-day life? Because these numbers are very low and you cannot be able to function on these numbers. Sure enough, I did feel weak. I did feel, all these symptoms, but in my mind, I just thought, this is normal. This is something that everybody goes through. Until I went on YouTube and I realized that there were so many Black women that had been experiencing the same symptoms, experiencing the same levels of blood loss, and also the same stories of always being tired, always feeling weak, and just not having the most consistent way of life that was not by having to be sick for a few days because you were on your period. So I owe it to the women here on social media who continue to share their experience, because when you share your experience, you're either giving someone permission to also share their experience, or you're giving them the comfort and community to know that they're not alone in whatever they're going through. I think that's why I feel I needed to share after hearing about Jessica Pettway, what she had to endure, which unfortunately led to her death from something that could have been prevented. I received my iron results, my iron level results. I was obviously freaking out. I was worried. I was terrified. And at that point, my hematologist was like, I will need to refer you to an OBGYN because you need to get checked out. They need to see what is going on. We need to know what is causing this much blood loss. And in the meantime, while I waited to do my own research to find a good OBGYN, because as a Black woman, we know you always have to do so much research to make sure you find the right kind of healthcare professional to help you, because 9 out of 10 times we're not even believed when we come with our symptoms and concerns to a doctor. And so while I was waiting to be able to do that, my hematologist was kind enough to write me a prescription to go to the nearest hospital and get my iron infusion. Now, an iron infusion is where you go to the hospital and you sit in there for like 6 hours getting iron injected into your body, like infused. And this can help you regain strength and energy, and you can be able to really function at a normal pace like everybody else. I was in college then, taking classes. I will actually share a picture of me at one of my iron infusions where I was literally doing my homework while I was getting my iron infusion, because you have to keep going with life. My professors were understanding in letting me be able to get this sorted while I was still in school and not be, penalized for not being in class. I was able to not have to worry about that part of my life, because that part of my life was not going to go well if this was not taken care of. Because with women with fibroids, you cannot function day-to-day life. If they're in excruciating pain, you're gaining weight, and you have no idea why you're gaining weight. You are tired, you're weak, you're lightheaded, you're dizzy. There's just so much that you're dealing with. Sometimes most patients, you only need an iron infusion to keep you going. In my case, because I was losing blood so much, I had to have someone look internally to see what is actually going on in there. What is the underlying reason for your constant blood loss? Because as much as we have to always have a menstrual cycle, we still don't have to lose that much blood. I just want to share a video from a TikToker I follow. Her name is Lulu Shell. She's a writer, director, and producer. She shared her experience a few weeks ago after the news of Jessica Pettway passing away was all over social media. Asked if I could share her story on my YouTube channel. She was kind enough to agree.
As a 35-year-old woman who struggles with fibroids, this is really sad and really scary, but also unfortunately extremely common when it comes to Black women's reproductive health. This is really hitting home because a lot of her symptoms are symptoms that I had, but I had to basically struggle and find multiple opinions before I received the proper care. Like I would not take no for an answer. I think fibroids is tricky because they disproportionately affect Black women, but they are also benign. So a lot of doctors tend to look at them as like, oh, well, you have these growths and it's normal for people like you to have these growths, so it's no big deal. And in the case of Jessica, they weren't fibroids. They ended up being cancerous, obviously. But also, even if they were, it's still a big deal. To bleed that much to where your hemoglobin level is at a 4 is a huge deal. She said in this caption that she was not even able to get the surgery to remove the fibroids because her blood supply was so low. She had to get transfusions. If we're at the point of transfusions, that means a medical negligence has happened because you shouldn't even have to get to that point. I went through something similar 5 years ago where my hemoglobin level was at like a 5 or a 6, and that shit is scary. Like I would get winded walking down the street. Like I had trouble breathing and was extremely fatigued and just not able to like move through life the way that I needed to as a grown working woman. And I ended up having to get iron transfusions to prepare for my myomectomy. But if I didn't get them at that time, if I continued to let my hemoglobin get lower, then I would have also had to get blood transfusion. But the only reason I got the iron transfusion was because I had to keep asking for second opinions and going to see other doctors. There's so many doctors who just do not care. You are just a name on a piece of paper. You are not an actual person. I've had doctors tell me to get certain procedures to help with my fibroids, and then I show up in office for the day of the procedure and they're like, hi, nice to meet you, because they don't even remember meeting me, even though they were the one that told me to get the procedure. I've had doctors conduct a hysteroscopy and be like, oh, it's just going to be like menstrual cramps. Mind you, a hysteroscopy requires you to dilate, aka it's like going into labor. And I'm still traumatized from that experience because there was no numbing, no nothing. And I had to go get a second opinion from a doctor who then actually prepared me for that procedure by like giving me medication that would help me like pre-dilate and all this stuff. I'm talking about this very openly because it's so taboo to talk about reproductive health care for people who have uteruses. And we need to actually have these conversations. There's so much misinformation about how our bodies work. There's so much misinformation about all of the things that can go wrong. And there's so much misinformation about from like on the end of doctors. I think a lot of doctors just don't have as extensive knowledge about what is going on as they should, especially if you're, specialized in gynecology. So if you're a Black woman and you have anything that seems even slightly off, a super heavy period, super painful cramps, go to the doctor, get checked out. If they tell you it's normal, ask for an ultrasound. Ask for a transvaginal ultrasound. If they're like, oh, it's still normal, still get a second opinion. Get a third opinion if you have to, because this is serious. This is real life, and it makes me so angry that this young woman is no longer here with us because there was somebody who just did not care about the severity of what she was going through. It's unacceptable.
When I was experiencing all of these things, I was living in Idaho. There's not a lot of Black physicians there. There's pretty much a 0.01 chance you're going to find a Black physician. And that was nerve-wracking for me because obviously I had read articles and I had seen in TV shows just how much Black women are rarely listened to when they present their concerns to healthcare professionals, whether in hospitals or in just general healthcare. I was consistently looking online and trying to find somebody who can help me, and also that could take the insurance I had at the time, because that's also another factor. I remember seeing on YouTube at that point, some women were expressing that they had fibroids, they knew they had fibroids, but their insurance couldn't cover the procedures to get them extracted. That was something that I was constantly feeling would have been a problem, because I assumed that I might not be able to have my insurance cover it. I ended up finding a good OBGYN. He came highly recommended because most of the friends I had at the time had either been assisted by him or he had, assisted in delivering their children. So I felt quite confident in his ability to be able to assist me. I remember the first meeting I had with him, I was terrified, but I just knew that at that point, I definitely had fibroids, because there was no other explanation that I had besides always having to lose blood when I was having my menstrual cycle. And so I remember I walked in with a good friend of mine and sat down. He was like, okay, what can we do you for? I explained to him my medical history and how I diagnosed with anemia many years back and had been experiencing consistent blood loss, abdominal pains, all of the things. He wasn't like doubting that I was telling him this, but he was kind of like surprised that I had so much detail in what I was sharing. And that's another thing that I really encourage you to do when you are going to an OBGYN. Give out as much information as you can, detailed, concise, because you know your body and you're going to explain everything that you have been experiencing, and that can help your case. I just told him, I was like, listen, I've been experiencing these heavy periods all my life and it's been uncomfortable, and my hematologist cannot keep giving me iron infusions unless or until we really find the underlying problem. And so he was like, okay. Sometimes we do have to take an ultrasound of your uterus so we can see what's going on. Since you're here now and I'm free, let me just get that ultrasound done. And I was happy. I could tell though that he wasn't like thinking that I had fibroids. He was just like it's routine, let's do this. Gave us one of his nurses. My friend was looking at me making jokes, and I could see, the screen. I didn't have a pregnancy, so obviously you couldn't see a person in my uterus. She was looking at the screen, the nurse, and she was chatty at the beginning, just talking, asking how I am, how's school, etc. After about a few minutes, she went quiet and she just looked at the screen and see that she was measuring, writing down, she was seeing on the screen. I was getting a little bit worried because I was like, she's definitely found something, and that's what she's writing down for the doctor to eventually look at. A part of me was relieved that, okay, so there is something. Another part of me was wondering, how bad is it? Because she went quiet and she wasn't chatty anymore. I was thinking she's probably seeing something, either is alarming her or shocking her. She's thinking this chick is doomed. Depending on whatever was on that screen. So I was just lying there, and after that, I put my clothes back on and we went into the waiting room. She walks in with the doctor and he's like, well, congratulations, you have fibroids. What? I laugh now, but it wasn't funny then, because the way he said it, it was like I've won the lottery for having this thing that's literally had halted my way of life every month for how many years. So I sat there and I looked at him and he's like, yeah, you do have fibroids, and it's not just one. There's a lot in there. And I was like, what? I was surprised, but relieved. Doctor of mine, bless him, he was great. He wanted to be thorough, doing a biopsy to be able to really locate where these fibroids are. In his explanation, he wanted to make sure that he knows where they're placed so that it'll be easy to extract them. Also, he wanted to know if him extracting them would need to be a non-invasive surgery. And so what that means is most women do experience fibroids, but they're not like a cause for concern. He was thorough and wanted to make sure that because of the history that I had been experiencing, he was more so concerned that he wants to make sure if and when they find a way to retrieve these fibroids, that he would know exactly where to go, get them out, and I can be fine. So I had to have another test where I had to go in and be put under so that they could do a biopsy. I was scared because I knew my body was going to be experiencing some changes. I mean, I'd already been experiencing changes with all of this, feeling tired, weak, shortness of breath, lightheadedness, dizziness. That had felt normal. It shouldn't, but it had felt normal that I was now nervous and scared to not have to deal with that. Like, I didn't know how I would have felt, how my body was going to react. He was telling me that, this is going to be a journey, and he's going to walk with me on this journey, and we're going to have to just deal with it. Before I carry on, I want to share another video from a doctor on TikTok. We love TikTok University. His name is Dr. Johnson. He practices in the US. Specialty is fibroid extraction. That's all the surgeries he does. It's a blessing that we have doctors and OBGYNs who are very specific and knowing exactly how to be able to get these things sorted.
So a common issue that I see on a day-to-day basis is abnormal uterine bleeding. Because so many women have fibroids, when you get an ultrasound, it's automatically assumed that abnormal uterine bleeding is always caused by fibroids, and this is not the truth. As I always say, fibroids are significant for size and location. For fibroids to truly be causing an issue with abnormal uterine bleeding or making it worse, they have to be pushing into the cavity, or usually pushing into the cavity. To have cavity involvement, it is then safe to say that yes, it should be making the bleeding worse or causing a problem. But if you have fibroids that are on the external surface or even in the muscle of the uterus, it's a strong possibility that the fibroids are not the issue, that there's a physiologic cause for abnormal uterine bleeding. Thus, myomectomies or hysterectomies is not always the answer or the cure or the treatment for abnormal uterine bleeding. You have to get to the underlying cause. So just because you have fibroids does not mean that's the reason why you're bleeding heavy. Another very significant cause is anovulatory bleeding. As women get older, you're not ovulating regularly, and you can have abnormal uterine bleeding without fibroids just because of age and not ovulating. But just food for thought. Just because you see fibroids or the doctor told you that you have fibroids, it does not mean that that's the reason why you're having abnormal uterine bleeding. Doc for the streets, fibroids later, I'm out.
Hope that video was informative. I want to finish off my story and explain what was the final trajectory that we took when it came to getting my fibroids out. I ended up needing to have surgery to remove my fibroids, and like the doctor shared in that previous video, it's called a myomectomy, where they have to perform a C-section incision surgery where they open you up and take out the fibroids. In my case, the reason was one of the fibroids I had that was within my uterine wall was huge. It was about 11 centimeters wide. And so they could not take it out vaginally with the others that were much smaller. I had to have a myomectomy. Before preparation for the surgery, my doctor had just told me, we are gonna make an incision on your bikini line and take the fibroids out, depending on how many you have, because sometimes he had said that with some women on an ultrasound we can see, let's say for example you have 6, and then when they open you up during operation they notice that there's more, and so he was like, we're gonna open you up and take out what we can, and then we close you up. The terrifying thing about this is, as you all know, when you're having a C-section, you're getting opened up, exposing the uterine, everything, taking out the baby. In this case, I was practically giving birth to my fibroid baby. That's what I like to see it as. I had to prepare for surgery mentally and
emotionally, because he had told me that this type of surgery can take a toll on you as a woman. I'll have to talk about this maybe in another video if you so choose. I didn't think much of it because in my mind I was thinking, oh, you're just gonna take out the fibroids, you're gonna sew me back up, I'm gonna be fine and I just recover. No, there's a whole other thing that you have to deal with post-surgery, and it's something that I'm still going through now that I've been post-surgery for like almost 2 years now. So my surgery was gonna take approximately 3 hours to be able to extract all these fibroids. Now I was scared, but I had such a good doctor. He listened to me. He was concise. He was very spearheaded in terms of how he wanted to make sure everything went well. He was careful and he was prepared. He had told me, I don't want to just open you up without any clear direction on his part. He wanted to know exactly where each of the fibroids were. He wanted to know how many, and he wanted to make sure that they were non-cancerous and that there wouldn't be any additional issues when they do cut. And if anything does happen, because obviously not all surgeries are predictable, he would still be very much so equipped to handle whatever was gonna come. I felt confident in him. If anything, I was the one who was just pushing him to get it over with. But he was like, no, I want to make sure that we get precise, accurate geographical situation of what's going on so that we can be able to just spearhead this and take care of you. For me, it was a blessing because most women do not get that. As we know, we are either not listened to, or not heard, and more so Black women unfortunately end up dying without being able to receive the proper care. It's unfortunate that 9 out of 10 times for those same sicknesses or diagnoses that we receive, they can easily be treated. I was fortunate enough that I had good friends around me and also a good doctor who was not willing to take any chances. It's rare, especially in the US, but there are some good doctors out there and I was very grateful for him. Of course, I'm gonna share with you some pictures of this ordeal. The surgery was May 2022 and it was really good. Well, I was under, obviously, but my doctor told me they were done within 2 hours. They didn't even take 3 hours to complete. I was able to have 3 fibroids extracted from my uterus. I was in the hospital for about 72 hours, went home. My friend took care of me. I was pretty much in excruciating pain. Listen, I have so much respect for women who have C-sections because it is not for the weak. It is the most pain I've ever experienced in my life. It was tough to pee. It was hard to just be able to do normal things. I had taken that for granted. I was out of that hospital. It was very hard for me to function. It was a really slow road. My doctor told me that I had to take it easy and carry things that were 10 pounds and over. I had to not eat solids for a while. I was constantly having to make sure I walk and move around. And he had told me that full recovery would take up to 12 months, that I would start feeling better minimum 6 weeks. I had to stop working. I was just making sure I took care of myself. After the surgery, I did experience some heavy bleeding because obviously organs have been moved around. It was normal. My doctor had told me I did have a heavy flow for those few days post-op. He had told me that I would start seeing a difference in like my 3rd or 4th cycle post-op. The myomectomy for me was successful because after about 3 months or 4 months, I used to have an 8-day period. It would be heavy. It was crazy. It was absolutely crazy. And to think in my mind that was seen as normal. It's not normal. In 4 months, I moved from 8 to 5 days. The consistency was not heavy, but like medium level. For me, anything less than what I had dealt with was still a win because I was so used to the heavy flows. My cramps were not as painful anymore. I still had them, but it wasn't painful. And then after about 6 months post-op, I was able to shift my period days to 3. So from 8 to 5 to 3. It's been a dream. I don't have cramps. It doesn't even feel like I'm on my period anymore. It does not feel like I'm on my period. I can be happy-go-lucky, can still do things, no cramps. You will experience a little bit of discomfort, like maybe lower back pain, which is natural, but nothing like what I had experienced for years. It has completely changed my life. This myomectomy surgery was a game changer. It's not something everyone gets to experience, but if you're someone who definitely knows your flow and your anemia is off the charts, consult your OBGYN to see if you can be able to get them do an ultrasound to see what's going on. And if they're fibroids, get them out. Get them out. My life has improved so much. I actually look forward to my period now. And it doesn't last long, it's only 3 days, so it's a win-win. Remember, before even having iron infusion, I used to take birth control to kind of help regulate my periods, and made me sick, they made me depressed, gained so much weight. It was crazy. I'm not gonna go into detail, but I just wanted to say that these issues that us Black women face when it comes to our physical health, not something we need to ignore. Like any sign of discomfort, anything you feel is not normal, go straight to an OBGYN and get that checked out. I was lucky, a doctor had told me my fibroids that were taken out, and as you saw in the picture, it was just 3, it wasn't a lot, and they were not huge. I have heard of women who have huge fibroids that they take out where before they're taken out and extracted, they look like they're pregnant. I did have a little bit of a belly, but it wasn't too much. I just could notice that I was gaining so much weight, and it was comforting to know that most of that weight was because of the fibroids. I'm just now having to adjust the body that I have, which feels new. Now I feel like I'm having to shed off some of the fibroid weight I had gained. My doctor did tell me it will take time, and I just have to learn to love my body again. I remember the first few weeks post-surgery, I didn't want to look at my scar. I just felt ugly. I just hated it, and I didn't like myself. I'm still working on making sure I take care of my body physically. I eat well. I make sure that I am constantly aware of my cycle and just seeing if there are any changes or abnormalities. But for the most part, I've been feeling good. I just wanted to share that with you all and just say we as Black women need to be extra vigilant when it comes to our health, when it comes to our bodies. We need to really just wise up, because we are having to deal with a lot. Whatever it is that you feel isn't normal, go get it checked out. Even if you feel like, oh, it's maybe not a big deal, it is, go get it checked out. Life is precious, and you need to always put yourself first. Please make that a priority. If anything is off, it probably is. Trust your gut and your intuition, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Even the healthcare professionals, if they seem like they're brushing you off, go to a second opinion. Just make sure that you are stalwart in wanting and deserving the care that you need, because at the end of the day, it's your body. You're the one who knows what's going on. And if you guys have any questions, or if you want to learn more, please share it in the comments. I would be very happy to share the little of what I've learned through this journey. And right now in my mid-30s, I feel like this hurdle is past me now. At the same time, all I can do is raise awareness and not let us Black women be statistics, but be the people that consistently are known for taking care of ourselves. I hope you all have a wonderful week, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.